Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this panel from the London Design Festival's Circular Design Project, focusing today on the fashion business. My name is Elizabeth Paton. I'm the international style correspondent from the New York Times. And joining me today, I have a great lineup of speakers. We've got Roni Brown, who is the head of London College of Fashion and the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of the Arts, London. We have Anya, the designer and founder of the luxury brand that bears her name. Liedtke, who was until recently head of global brands at Adidas, but is now describes himself as a free agent now, I believe. And last but not least, we have Sara Eriksson, who is the circular business development lead at H&M. Thank you to everybody for joining me today. So before we start, I thought I would just say that from my perspective, fashion product and innovation is really about three things. It's about making products more striking. How can an item be more attractive to new and existing consumers and make them want to buy it? It's about making products smarter at a time when technology is infiltrating every aspect of our lives. How can that be used to make products better and absorbed into how we make those products? And last but not least, and perhaps most pertinently with today's discussion, it's about sustainability. And at a time when scrutiny around overproduction and supply chains has never been greater, how can companies reduce the human and environmental toll of what they do on the planet? And for some, and certainly some here, answers can be found in investing in circular design. Sara, I thought I'd start with you if that's okay. And would you mind just outlining for us what exactly circular economy is?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for that question and that good introduction. Really good to be here today with this group of great people. So big question, because I think we should not forget that we're actually shifting an economic system. So it's really a big question that we're tapping into. I think I would like to say three pillars. So where the first one is to actually design out waste and pollution from the start, in the beginning of a product's lifetime or lifespan. And then once that product is out there, it's about, making the longest use of those materials as possible. And I think that's when it becomes really interesting also when we start to see new business models popping up, like e-commerce, rental, care and repair services that are really all about keeping those products in use for as long as possible. So also business models that can enable us actually to decouple the monetary growth from the use of virgin resources. So I think that's number two. And then number three would be to regenerate natural systems. So all about, making sure that the products that we put on the market will do more good and less harm to the resources that we use.
H&M has said that it aims to be fully circular, a big ambition. Do you have a time frame for that? And could you also just talk to us a little bit about the challenges given you work across so many geographies and with so many independent manufacturers?
Yes, it's also a big question, but we say that in 2030, we want to make sure that 100% of all our material in the new products are sustainably sourced or even recycled material. Then we have this even bolder ambition to actually be climate positive in 2040. And that's when, like you mentioned, it becomes really complicated, because to get there, we are really dependent on collaboration. And I think that's also one of the good reasons that why we're all here today. It's like, this is something that we're into as an industry. Not a single brand can reach it by themselves. It will of course be based on renewable energy efficiency, but we're also looking into the role that actually new circular business models can play reaching that goal, where we really see that we could actually maybe continue to provide fashion and news value, but without using new products. So how can we actually continue to deliver our skills that we have been delivered to our customer for 70 years, but just with new business models? So we really see how that, but the challenge, like you say, I think it's scale, it's a sense of urgency, and it's a lot of unknowns. We live in a period where we are right now in a period of unknowns due to the pandemic, and but what we do know is that this will be the part of a resilient future to handle that.
I mean, Eric, you at Adidas were at the forefront of talking a lot about how circular design can be adopted by big companies and big retailers, a lot about material innovation as well. Can you sort of tell me a little bit about some of the hallmark projects, the Futurecraft sneaker, for example, and what you were trying to achieve there?
Yeah, I think, thanks. I think all comes down to the consumer. I think we lasered, like at Adi, we lasered in on what the consumers, desires, and we obsessed on helping the consumers in their life, not just in their sport, but in their game, in their life, and in their world. And I think with those things we unpacked. So Adidas, you've got to make the best sports shoes. You got to make the best sport clothing. You have to kick higher, jump faster, run, jump. Kick harder, jump higher, run faster. We also started to unpack things in lifestyle because the culture of sport doesn't just stay on the field. So there we introduced Kanye West and stuff. But the real unlock for me was when we started to play on the fringes of sustainability, and we did a partnership with Parlay for the Oceans, and we did this ocean plastic shoe that we were able to present in 2015 to the United Nations. And the Instagram post went as large and as far as anything we ever did with Kanye. And it just kind of was an aha moment from not just myself, but the company on saying, wait a minute, people care, the consumer cares, and they just don't really know all the time who to trust.
Were you surprised by that consumer response?
I should say no, but I was. As the head of marketing and the board member that's always in charge of creation, we took some risk in doing it, but it was a wake up call for everyone. So then all of a sudden sustainability stopped being this philanthropic activity you did on the side and start a sourcing procurement exercise. It started to be a consumer driving proposition. And with that, we started to unlock everything. We came up with, similar to what Sara just talked about, some moonshots by 2024 will be 100% off of, virgin polyester, which is, roughly 600 million units a year of stuff to be recycled, made of recycled. It's a hell of a moonshot. I believe Adidas is still honoring that goal, but those are things we kind of put in place. And one thing led to another. One was getting off of plastic. One was recycling. And the third one was, can we build something that's made to be remade? And that was the Futurecraft Loop shoe you referenced. Early days, but in partnership with BASF, Adi was able to make a single material shoe out of extruded thermal polyurethane that could, be ground up. Usually shoes are made of 9 different materials. And I think that's an unlock right there, because when you start to make things out of singular material, that's where design starts for circularity, right? It's like you've got to make something that's made to be remade. So then it doesn't have to be deconstructed when you take it back. You've got big things. With circularity, you have to lift for big things. You have to make something that's made to be remade. You have to distribute it in a way that you can get it back. So you have to challenge the model of wholesale multi-brand sales. You then have to collect it, and that's reverse logistics. I guess that's somehow easier to do because of everybody, the way they're shopping today during COVID and everything comes to your door anyway. They can take something away, I guess. And then you have to rematerialize that or recycle that product and make it into raw material again. And that's hard lifting for the fashion industry, whether it be apparel or footwear.
Got it. You also left the company last year. Can you tell us why you did that and what the plan is now?
Yeah, I'm super proud of what we did at Adi. But once you see and once you hear some of the things you see and hear about the state of the environment, the state of plastic waste, the state of the degradation of the oceans, the fires on the west coast of America, the fires in the Arctic, the 1 degree increase in Celsius, what 4 degrees could look like. I think that the industry needs disruption and systemic change a lot faster than the incumbents are willing or can do. So as much as I loved what Adi was doing, and maybe Adi gets to $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion, $4 billion in recycled product, they're still a 25 billion euro company. So it's not the change you want to see. And I use a very often used use case, which is Tesla. I live in Germany. The Porsches and the Mercedes and the BMWs weren't going to make an electric car unless Tesla scared them into change. And now Tesla's the beast of the Autobahn, which I never thought I'd see 5 years ago. And everyone's coming out with their electric vehicle to keep up. So you can make a compelling, great brand, build on better things for the platform that's better for the world, and make the systemic change in the industry. And I think that's what the fashion industry needs around circularity. So I left to do that.
I mean, Tesla, which you pointed out there, is arguably a luxury auto brand. Anya, you of course are a luxury brand. You know, H&M and Adidas are both massive companies. Yours is much smaller and works at the higher end. I'm curious about the advantages that you think that sort of operating at that different tier of the market gives you when it comes to adopting circularity into your design. And I'd also love you just to chat a little bit about the I Am a Plastic Bag campaign that you released, because that's a bit of a pivot from the bag that you released, what was it, 11, 12 years ago now?
2007, yeah. Well, so in terms of smaller brand, is it easier or harder? I think it's a bit of both, honestly, because obviously it's not, products are perhaps not quite as price sensitive as some of the bigger brands. But of course it's also quite difficult because you, in terms of reaching minimums to do really innovative new materials, it's much harder. So you sort of have, you know, the good and the bad. So I think, you know, everyone struggles. There's no, I remember talking to someone with a huge business, said it's just as hard for us in a different way. And I think it's probably right. We're all sort of fighting on all fronts to just try and keep moving forward and changing our supply chains just to make them better. In terms of I'm a Plastic Bag, we launched I'm Not a Plastic Bag back in 2007. Which was a pretty innocent project. I mean, I'm no expert and still no expert, but it was just simply about raising awareness of the issue of single-use plastic. And we did that project. And I think a bit like Eric was saying, I mean, we set out to make noise. That was the aim, but it made more noise than we dreamt of. I mean, I think 80,000 people queued in one day in the UK, and it went the same in Hong Kong, Tokyo, 30 people in hospital in Taiwan. I mean, I'm not proud of that fact, but I mean, it created a lot of noise, but it made a difference because people stopped using, the numbers of single-use plastic bags went down significantly as a result of that. And then everyone sort of pulled together, and you know, then there was legislation and so on. But we've since recently relaunched a project called I Am a Plastic Bag, because, you know, here we are in 2020, and I sort of thought I'd done my bit and back to business, but the fact is we're so far from having solved this problem. And yet, of course, the dilemma is different. You know, now it's actually not just about awareness, clearly, it's actually how can we keep the 8 billion tons of plastic that are on this planet in circulation and save them from landfill. So, you know, it's how do we just keep things in circulation? In some respects, in my industry, things naturally stay in circulation because if they're expensive, people tend to sell them on, and they tend to, you know, have a sort of a natural sort of
value, yeah.
However, to the point of materials and you know, really looking at every single part of the supply chain, and we've resisted sort of pushing out targets, and I really admire and I kind of want to do that. But actually, what we decided was, frankly, was just to get going, because actually you can sort of, you know, you can spend so much time trying to work out what's right and what's wrong. We thought we'd just jump in with both feet. So we launched this project, which we made out of, we spent 2 years working this fabric, which was made out of recycled PET bottles, but we wanted to coat it because it behaves like a really lovely cotton, and we wanted to coat it with a recycled coating. We managed to extract PVB, which is the plastic that goes between the windscreen in cars to stop it shattering, and to use that as the coating. So it was kind of, it was innovative and different. And I think as you know, the great thing about high fashion is you can use it as a platform for communication in a really positive way as well. So it's been really, really well received. I mean, it's incredibly complicated to do, as we all know in these fields, but you know, we just got to move fast on this. I mean, you know, I just want to go faster and faster. I'm learning all the time. We're not perfect. And I think it's really important actually to sort of not criticize people for not being perfect and saying, just get going. Because once you start, it's like you go to the gym, you then start eating better, or mostly. And so you just kind of, you know, learn. Now we're looking at all of our packaging and every single aspect and all our printing and how we move things around. So there's so much to do. But it is urgent. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. And you know, if you think what we've all done, and if you like, you know, given up for COVID, I mean, that's nothing compared to, you know, an overheated planet. I mean, it's so frightening and serious. And I just think we just all need to go incredibly fast. But the last thing I'll say is that also we need to save jobs, because of course, if everyone ends up being hungry and worrying about their future, actually the environment just sinks down people's agendas, and that's really, really frightening. So, you know, that balance of trying to sort of say, listen, it's about customer paying more, perhaps the brand making less, but you know, actually saving jobs and keeping people working is also a really important part, so we can kind of progress. So it's not easy. It's like walking through treacle with your hands tied behind your back, but we can do it. 100% we can do it.
Constant balancing act. Roni, do you hear that same level of urgency from the young students who are coming through your hallways and classrooms now? I mean, what is the response from them about the climate emergency, and what is the role that higher education, I guess, can play in ushering in a circular economy?
Well, I mean, as you say, you know, our young people are the future of the industry. And they keep us on our toes, right? I mean, they are extremely demanding. I'm picking up on what Anya said about urgency. You know, our students are demanding that as a university, we create the kind of curriculum and the kind of responses that makes a proactive environment for their studies, that they can, you know, learn and intervene. I would say that our students are very values-led, and when I say that, I mean across the social justice spectrum, so not just in sustainable fashion, but across a whole raft of things that they really care about. They care passionately about the planet. They care about each other. You know, at UAL, it's a very diverse, incredibly global community of students. So they are necessarily, on a daily basis, thinking about the connections between one part of the world and another part of the world, the impact of what one part of the world does on what another part of the world does. And I think, you know, crucially, what we're seeing through the pandemic, but equally, we would say the same about Extinction Rebellion, that this is a global environment and it requires us to think in much more connected ways. So our students are really demanding around this agenda. As I say, they care about the planet, they care about each other, they care about their careers, you know, and this is also pragmatically really important for us, that we put this debate right at the heart of the jobs market of the future, because, you know, this is where our students demand that their skills are up to date, that they can come into an industry that requires this level of understanding and the preciseness of the tools and the interventions that are going to work, and that they're equipped in that way. Otherwise, what on earth are we doing? But they also are kind of disruptors as well. And that's also, I think, what I'm hearing, you know, what the industry needs. And they also care about their authenticity as young designers. And I think somehow that thing about personal authenticity, you having values and you needing to express them through your practice, is sort of tangentially important to this debate. And that means that, you know, we don't just think pragmatically, we also think about sort of pure creativity, that ability to just put the new idea out there, you know, and that through that, you know, we will find all sorts of solutions that we don't currently have. And that's really important. But yeah, I mean, our students care who we work with. They wish us to vet our partners, you know, who we set up competitions with, you know, who comes into the room, who has authority, who writes the books, you know. So yeah, it's a fascinating environment. They also care that their university grows the research that in a circular way enables their curriculum to be up to date, their teachers to be up to date, and that we are engaging with the industry routinely about the kind of research needs that the industry needs. So it's, again, that sort of wonderful kind of circular environment for where knowledge is both made, and then how we circulate that knowledge between ourselves and to this next generation.
I guess this is a question now for all of you, but, you know, how close are we really to getting a circular economy at scale in the fashion industry? There's been some great progress, but I mean, Eric, you touched on this as well. There's a long, long way to go.
I can take a try on that one. I mean, I think it's hard to say how far we are or how close we are, but I think we've never been closer than this. And I think really listening into what Roni says about the next generation and their expectation on us as an industry, I think we really need to make this shift to stay relevant as a business, as an industry, as a way to consume and a way to just dress yourself. I think it's really time that we update our business models, our ways of thinking, our ways of doing things. So I think it's really optimistic to hear what they expect, and also what you mentioned about the broader spectrum of creativity and design, that it could also be how do you actually, I mean, there is a growing population. We will continue to get dressed. There will be people that love to express themselves through clothes. So how can we continue to offer like that news value and that excitement and that attractive solution, and that we somehow have this kind of power to create a desire within the industry, and just say that, be comfortable with, continue to say that is something that we can still do, but we need to do it in a different way. So I really think also, I mean, with the pandemic, I think we've seen a lot of acceleration, for example, when it comes to digitalization. I mean, since March, we are all up on Zoom, connecting all over the world. So we also see that things are possible to actually accelerate when we really see the urgency. And I think, like we all mentioned, the sense of urgency when it comes to the climate impact of our industry is really there. So hard to say exact, but never closer than it is right now.
I think, if I may, I think that's really a lovely and positive. And I'm such a positive person naturally, but I think probably we've got a long way to go if we're being honest. And I think what was interesting for me in doing the sort of projects we've been looking at is that even talking to the absolute experts is actually they don't often really know what's right either. And that was a little bit sort of scary for me, which has made me really think, for example, there's a huge debate around leather. And, you know, without going into all the details, I kind of thought, you know, we'll use recycled leather for this latest project. But, you know, then you realize that's actually basically plastic. And then you look at vegan leather is basically just plastic. You know, really interesting developments in plant-based, you know, leathers, inverted commas, but they're not quite there yet in terms of strength, and they smell. So there was lots of stuff going on. But actually what we found sort of for me in this project was actually leather is when it's sensibly resourced and tanned and no deforestation. And so, you know, have complete sort of traceability of where it's from. Actually, that was the most sensible thing. And I think my take-up was we need to go back to common sense, because actually we can all become quite jingoistic, and there's so many experts spouting this and this, but actually often they're not looking in the round. And actually, you know, leather was interesting because you need animals moving the land and turning the soil. And, you know, you actually, I think we've just all got to go back to a bit of common sense. And I think one big thing for me that just sort of struck me is that my entire career, I'm now 52, so quite a long career, has all been with the word globalization attached to it. At every single point, it's been globalization, your supply chain, selling, you know, moving around, Tokyo for a weekend, so on. And actually, I think localization has to become the new buzzword. It's about actually, which is what's happened. We've been forced to do through this pandemic. But I think localization and common sense, you know, not to get too sort of crazy about a fad, but actually really what does make sense. And actually what makes sense is what our grandmothers used to do. It's make, do, amend. It's waste not, want not. It's, you know, less but better. You know, buy things, love them for ages, buy better, but just keep using it. So, I mean, it's not rocket science, actually. I think we need to kind of not be scared into thinking it's something cleverer than that, because actually it's the simple solutions are often best.
I think one thing is, oh yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Let me jump in. I mean, I can. I mean, I'm going to probably be on the opposite spectrum. I think we're nowhere. I think I'm not going to counteract Sara. I think we're further than we've ever been, but the big guys aren't doing it. I mean, here's some numbers, right? The fashion industry, if we level set, is about 3 trillion. Just all, if we're talking all apparel, all shoes, and that's everybody in sports and LVMH and H&M and everybody else. And maybe resell, which everybody wants to talk about, is going to be 50 billion. So 50 billion is a big nut, except when you compare it to 3 trillion. And I think the only thing that's scalable is a circular solution. That's why I'm such a big EMF fan. And I've spent the last 10 months of my free agent interviewing, talking to every material supplier I can find, to Anya's point, to try to see what's out there, whether it be plastic, BASF, Arkema, whether it be startups like Modern Meadows or Evernew or natural fiber welding or what have you out there. And to be quite honest, there's very little development. There's a lot of guys with a lot of dreams, but if you dig into that 3 trillion, my estimate from my 25 years in the industry is that less than 1% is being spent on R&D to solve sustainable issues. Yet we know the fashion industry is the second biggest polluter in the world to the petroleum industry. Yet we know that we're throwing away 90% of the clothes, 10% are being recycled. We know all these things, and yet no one's doing about it because the incumbents, to be quite honest, they can't disrupt themselves. They would be complicit, and their linear supply chains of make, take, and throw away are set up to do just that. And seasonality and desirability and fast fashion and all these things have set them up for that. So only disruption from this audience, from the people listening, the 185 soldiers on the phone are going to help us solve this thing, which is why I'm committed to networking with all of you, because it's, you know, we're going to need a village to solve this thing, but we need to solve it. And it's a call to arms for all of us. We've never been closer, but we should not sing ourselves to sleep with the lullaby that recycling is working. It's not.
Understood. I think something that struck me as I was listening to all of you speak was just that, as well as this being a design story, which of course it is also an information story, and there is so much information out there. There's also a lot of misinformation out there. You know, is this about data as well, you know, in terms of moving towards a circular economy, and how helpful can data be in getting us where we need to be?
I mean, data is always helpful, but I think it's so urgent, actually, that it's sort of incumbent on everyone. They know, and we all know what's going on in our supply chains, and we all know what sort of makes sense. So yes, data, of course, but I think it's easy to sit around waiting for something. We've just got to take action. And I think about the village is lovely. I think it's going to take a freaking great city, frankly, but you know, what will change this is customers saying, I'm not buying that, it's not well resourced, you know, show me how, what. It really is, that's the power. It really will change the people who are polluting, because if ultimately what you know, promotes people, encourages people to change is profit. It's the carrot, unfortunately. That's how people are driven, sadly, in many ways, but you know, their businesses, we get it. But so it's how can you change that carrot, or how can you encourage people that, you know, that you move the carrot. I mean, I had a lovely example. I was at a leather fair, and there was one, you know, particular stand that had really sort of, you know, brilliant and so best in class gold, you know, standard leather working group leathers. And suddenly all the businesses on that stand was packed. And you can see all the other sort of old fashioned leather suppliers kind of going, And of course what happens? Next season, they're there with their better resource leathers. So that's what drives it. You know, people follow profit. That's the carrot. So I think therefore that's where the village and the city really has a part to play.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think really interesting things coming up. But I think coming back to your question on data, I think, I mean, one thing that is science-based are the targets. I mean, we need to reach carbon law if we want to stay within the 1.5 Paris Agreement. So I think on one hand, we have something that is truly science-based, and then I think data can be an enabler. I mean, we look at circular identity on a garment level, how you can actually have the traceability that could be an enabler for circular business models going forward. But I really would like to, I mean, I really agree with Anya that we shouldn't sit and wait for those innovation to make it happen. And I think going back also to what you mentioned, Eric, about the disruption factor and how we can't, I mean, we don't really know what the disruption is going to look like, but maybe we can take responsibility and feel accountable for that disruption factor. Because I think we talk a lot about changing customer needs and what the customer expects from us. But I think also on one side, we can also, if we make solutions, for example, for e-commerce or rental, that are attractive enough, accessible enough, affordable enough, convenient enough, maybe then we can also play with that disruption factor and actually make it bigger than what we think today. So I really, I think we should all, I mean, me first working for a really big company, we need to find those ways because we have committed to science-based targets. So
can I make a pitch for a different kind of knowledge base? I mean, you've talked about data and you've talked about technology, but on the human side, you know, in terms of consumer behavior and how that might change, and picking up on Eric's point about it takes a village, that might mean that we need our, you know, I suspected that this conversation would be a lot around fashion design and fashion production and supply chains, etc. But don't we also need our fashion psychologists? Don't we also need our fashion anthropologists? Don't we also need theorists? You know, don't we need, you know, all of the disciplines, if you like, to really think through this problem? Because ultimately, shifting consumer behavior will be part of the solution around scale, or am I not getting that quite right?
No, I think that's completely right. I mean, that's funny if that was one of the things about the original I'm a Plastic Bag project we did. If you just make something trendy, that actually can be a real driver. So, you know, whether it's an anthropologist that needs to work that out or just a really sort of savvy marketeer or whatever it is, I think that's really important. I also think, I mean, it's just education. I mean, I just think that every child in every land should go and see a recycling centre and go and visit a landfill site. Because actually, if there's one thing that made me just step back and actually kind of go, Christ, this is scary, it was that. And so I think people are so distanced. We actually, when we launched this latest thing, we actually closed all our stores for Fashion Week and we filled our shops with 90,000 used water bottles, plastic PET water bottles. And that was 8.5 minutes of landfill. And actually just connecting people to the problem is really powerful, because I think people are so distant. I think it's one of the issues. So I think education is a really important piece as well.
And I guess that's one advantage, of course, that the fashion industry has over other sectors, that it is particularly good at inciting consumer desire in storytelling. And I wondered then if that's part of the responsibility. It's not just the design angle, it's using that platform and that ability to shape consumer consciousness to make that change.
Yeah, I think the consumer is, I think the consumer's voting. I think we've got enough use cases and stories, whether it be from Anya, from Sara, from Adidas. There's enough use cases where there's examples that consumers, when they're given the choice, they'll vote. I think the data of, are they clear on what sustainability means? Are they clear on what is good and what is not? I mean, we've got the Higg index that is an index in the world of fashion, but it's also for profit, and it supports, you know, big plastic as much as anybody. So is it a legitimate, transparent, you know, list? And I do think, Roni, you're absolutely right. We need to change consumer behavior, but we need to have some sort of scorecard on what is good and what is better and what is best, because what we're going to be forced with is the boardroom trade-off of, you know, marketing, development, design versus the CFO P&L. And you've got to show some sort of marketing benefit and consumer acquisition capture benefit to afford the increased price, which, let's be honest, the circularity costs more. There's no doubt about it. So you've got to weigh those things when you get into, you know, the real business and the financials. I think the consumer's voting for it. At what price are they voting for it? At what behavior do we need to change? And at what cost can the company afford? And I think we need more data in this area. I think the consumer data is obvious. I think it then comes into the P&L, how we get the data on what are the good, better, best materials, and do it in a transparent way where we can all have peer review. And then thirdly, how do we really drive the consumer behavior to understand what circularity is? Because it requires a bit of a change. I don't think it should require too much change, but it requires them to behave differently, like returning stuff versus just throwing it away. And there is no way. So there's a fundamental shift of behaviors there. So it's a big lift, which is why I think we need to all be doing it together, because that's how it works.
I think also it would be very helpful if we all came to some sort of traffic light coding, a bit like they have on food, that actually just signals, because it's hard, frankly, for the consumer to know what's greenwashing and what's real and what's right. And I think that would, if we could all come together on that, that would be an amazing start, where at least there's absolute transparency and clarity for the customer, because I think they feel confused, frankly, and sometimes they're shortchanged. So I think that's something that we need quite urgently.
It's interesting that intuitively, you know, for me, intuitively, you would know something about how something was made, or its quality, or its longevity, you know, from, you know, and I think, you know, maybe that's just a missing part in very young people's education. Like if you make things, you respect craft, you understand where things come from, you know what it is to make something, you know, you're curious, you're more curious about things when you make them, you know, and I wonder whether we need to return to some of the fundamentals in very young people's education, about what it is to bring something into the world, what's at stake.
Transparency then is one of these key building blocks towards getting to circularity, that people know where their clothes or their accessories have been sourced from.
I think so. I mean, I think it gives power to the consumer, and I think it also, you know, shames and names or celebrates those people who are doing good things, because actually some of the brands that you might think are not doing great stuff and sort of feel quite polluting, actually doing some amazing stuff behind the scenes. I mean, to a certain extent, and it's why it's so lovely to meet Sara, you know, the big brands have so much power. It's easier really than smaller brands where we don't have that clout. So, you know, it just some sort of sense of you know, honesty throughout, that it's just totally transparent. I think that would be a really a real help actually in this battle.
Yes, I think we start to see more and more demand also from the consumer side to have customer-facing footprint tools where you can actually, I mean, really follow and see the effects and the impact of the choices that you make, but really on a garment level when you shop, without getting out of that context and being forced to read up on it. But I just wanted to add something to what you mentioned, Eric, also about the P&L. And I think it's a really important thing that we need to start to talk also about the true cost of a linear business, because we often end up comparing a circular initiative and a linear initiative, but we don't talk about, I mean, we don't have carbon pricing in our P&Ls today. We need more legislation and things that will actually update our future P&Ls so that we will actually compare apples to apples, so to say, because there is something, I mean, that, like you say, that's often where the decisions are made. It's what we look at. So
it would be wonderful, but having run a P&L for a long time at a big brand, those aren't factored in. It's going margin, it's net margin, and I agree with you. The cost of petroleum extraction to make polyester and the cost of end of life is appalling, but those don't go on the balance sheet yet. If there was a carbon tax, I think it'd be a wonderful thing, but that's asking a lot from the public sector, which I don't have the confidence you may have. You know, I'm American, so we're more broken than most.
I think we've slightly touched on the issue though, of course, which is, you know, despite what you would think, volumes of fashion consumption are only growing each year. There's a booming middle class, people are buying more and more, and this is a market that's just based on selling more. I mean, is it okay, first of all, I guess, with the circular economy to say it's okay to keep buying fashion over and over again as long as it's biodegradable? Is that what the message is going to be? Or, you know, should we be designing and producing less, especially with the emergence of businesses like resale, for example?
I really think that we should maybe not say buying, but access. I mean, there should still be access, but new access models like then e-commerce and rental that is not depending on the raw material and production. I might be naive and optimistic, but I really see that as a solution to continue to provide the demand. I mean, cater for the demand there is, but move away from buying new things and still access fashion. And
I think you've got to be careful.
Your question. Sorry, Eric. Go ahead.
Sorry, Anya. I think you've got to be careful, Lizzie, on trying to change consumer behavior too much. We are a species that collects things. It's in our DNA. We buy things. I don't know why, but we like things. It's been psychologically proven, Roni, that we get a dopamine hit when we walk out of the store. And what I think we need to focus on is the double dopamine hit. Like, what is can I buy something and also be doing good? To Sarah's point, can I buy something and know that actually it was already worn and I'm buying it as a rewear or I'm buying it as a re-commerce, and that's okay. You give it a second life. I mean, we have to maximize lives. I guess my fear is you're not going to find so much biodegradability of the 3 trillion. It's not even a billion probably. So that's an issue because of contaminants that get into it. And if you just focus on recycled, that number's growing dramatically, but it gives you one more life and then it goes away. So I think we have to solve for the bigger lifts that require circularity, and EMF provides that guideline. It's just hard to do. The guidelines are nice, but it's just, you got to find the stuff to make it happen. Sorry, Anya.
I can't remember what I was going to say now, so it's fine.
One other question I had as well is, of course, in the last couple of years, we've seen a big shift in it from a lot of fashion brands of all sizes in terms of putting sustainability front and center of their business models. But be solely responsible? Do we think that governments are going to step in? Do governments have to step in, or can brands be doing this by themselves?
I didn't catch the whole question. We lost you a little bit, but I think.
Sorry about that. It was just.
I think it has to be a combination, really, right. Because I mean, there's it's the moving the carrots, as we were saying, so that you can make profit. That could be, for example, that there's a tax break or there's an incentive. I think we just need to accelerate this so fast. We've got to throw everything at it. So, legislation, nanny state, a little bit possibly, incentives, and get the village mobilized. It's got to be all things all at the same time, I think. But I think there are things that governments can do, and I think they should do.
Yeah, I have a clear point of view. The private sector will lead the way. The private sector will come back and legislate to put corridors in, but you cannot wait for the public sector. It's too slow, and we need action, and we need it yesterday. So to me, it's got to be led by business. It's got to be led by consumer demand, and once we create that stir, it'll go very fast. I mean, I just used the use case of ocean plastic. Nobody talked about ocean plastic as even a material 5 years ago in 2015 when we launched the first shoe. Today, it's a hygiene factor. Everyone's got ocean plastic in their offer, and their supply chain set up. So I think it can go super fast, but we got to crack the code.
I'm conscious that time is ticking. I did want to focus a little bit on the pandemic, because obviously it's had such a dramatic and difficult impact on the industry. Are any of you nervous that investment into sustainability initiatives may dwindle as a result of the pandemic, as cash gets short for people? Or do you feel positive that people sort of recognize this is a question of resource economics, of ROI as much as it is anything else, and will keep investing?
I'm nervous. I'm nervous because I just think that people are struggling to survive and will, have a tough time. And of course, it's short-sighted actually to think that just going back to the old ways will be the right way. It won't, because the customer, as we're all agreeing, is demanding, traceability and something that's not damaging the planet. But there's sort of muscle memory that people are used to, using and doing. And I think that when times are tough, people tend just to go back to what they know and what's quick and what's easy. So I think it needs a really big shunt. And I think customers demanding it will be the biggest and most effective solution to that.
I think Roni, I think on a company level, I think investments will still go in that direction, because I think there are a lot of us that really see this as the only way to resilience. I mean, this happened now. This is maybe only just a small slice of what we could imagine, I mean, due to the climate effects. So to be resilient in the future, I think we still need to invest in that direction. And of course, I'm nervous and it will not be fast enough, but I truly believe that it will happen, again, being optimistic. But then also I think it's good on a consumer level. I think there might be, I mean, could there also be an increase of care and repair services that are strongly connected to what you're saying, Anya? You will have less spend, you will save your money, you will try to mend things, share things with other. V-commerce could also be a way to access fashion at a lower price. So I also see some strong synergies between that kind of really first degree need of a lower spend and a circular offering. So I think it's on two levels that, yeah, I hope that it will go in that direction.
I suppose I'm, trying to feel optimistic about the role of research and development, and we're seeing research councils in the UK take this very seriously. I mean, even before the pandemic, industrial strategy and funding research around the development themes of the industrial strategy, including circularity. We've seen that. We've seen that as a strong feature in higher education practice. And we're seeing, as a result of that funding, universities collaborate in far more radical ways. University Arts London is collaborating with Leeds and Queen Mary and UCL and Loughborough, etc., on very large scale research programs that are, in our case, all about fashion and textiles. It's all about the technology that can support this agenda. And I think we have a job to be very clear about the kinds of R&D that we need, the kind of research questions that we have, the kind of funding that we're looking for to take this agenda forward. You've expressed it so clearly as a panel how urgent this is. And I therefore think, government funding into research and research council work and what universities can do. I mean, what's incredibly refreshing about the investment into the creative clusters program is that it's absolutely about research with the industry. It's not about universities kind of doing stuff in remote academic boxes. It's really about collaboration and about applied thinking. And I feel very, very hopeful about that.
I've got time really for one more question. I know we've got lots and lots of design professionals listening in. So I wondered if we could end with each of you, first of all, describing an area of focus when it comes to circularity for you in the next 12 months. What's a target that you are working towards in your line of work or in what you're seeing? And second of all, just a piece of advice to those listening and engaging with this on how they too can be more circular in their approach to design, whether it's a book that you've read or a tool that you use. Anya, maybe I could kick off with you.
So in terms of targets, and I mean, we're just trying to go as fast as we can, as quick as we can, and try and learn as much as we can. That's really my agenda. I'm not setting any targets. I'm just doing everything we can, you know, and whilst trying to keep running a business, because it's hard. You know, we also need to keep employing people, but there's a lot we can do, and it's super exciting. And I think being as vocal as possible as well. You know, we all come together and we'll all make it happen. In terms of advice, I mean, it just goes back for me to that. You know, read everything, obviously, but it's about common sense. I mean, you know, if we go back to how our grandparents lived, if we forget that word disposable, and actually, you know, rather than buying 12 things, buy 6, buy them, you know, twice as nice things, and just wear them again, and recycle them and reuse them and keep in circulation. It's not rocket science. Don't be scared by it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for us, our mission right now, it's really to, I mean, it's the balance between the short term and the long term, that we keep coming back to the sense of urgency, but how that can also, how that needs to be connected to a long-term vision. So for us, both when it comes to, of course, to design and implement our circular design principles, to have a circular supply chain, and then to also increase the offer of circular business models to keep products in use and reuse for as long as possible. And also learn through innovation when it comes to recycling and how that could be the next step within recycling and get that loop spinning. But I think as a personal advice, I would say share. I mean, sharing is caring. Either it comes to awareness, to your jacket, to your skills of mending, or just your sewing machine, or your shoes for running. I mean, sharing will take us far, I think. And I mean, knowledge like this in collaborative networks, it's a good start.
Roni?
I would say, I would say it's an opportunity of a lifetime. I think that we've outlined the issue, we've outlined the opportunity. I think designers, engineers, creators, makers that I know lick their chops at these types of opportunities. It's a white space. As Sara said, we should do it together. I think we're not going to change a 3 trillion industry with one by one. It shouldn't be seen as a competitive USP. It should be holistic. The consumer is asking for it. They're asking for clarity. We need more transparency. We need to do things like Anya said. We need multiple solutions. We need resell. We need listen to your grandmother's solutions. We need new materials. We need new ways to collect. We need, it's not going to be one thing. It's going to be 100 things, and we should keep the dialogue going with things like this. And I applaud EMF. I would start reading everything EMF has on their website, because they've done so much work on this topic. It's literally mind-boggling. It's the first place I did, and it took me like a month to get through everything. And then I would call Joe and ask a bunch of questions. So I think it's just necessary to dig in and focus on simple design for zero waste. I mean, sometimes it can be that simple, and that can mean all sorts of answers, but design for zero waste, and stop talking about it and start doing shit.
Roni, did you have anything that you wanted to
add? I see. Sorry. Well, you know, it's important that we embed sustainability into the curriculum at every level, and we've done a huge amount of work on that. But you know, it's taking it to the next level. It's ensuring that that's genuine. It's acknowledging complexity, so that we don't think this is a small thing here, but that we genuinely think through everything that we do, to make sure that that's in place. But I think there's something broader about our university. It's not just about curriculum, is it? I've talked about partnerships and collaborations and research, and therefore it's kind of stepping it up to the next level across everything that we do.
Well, there's been a lot of honesty from this panel today, which is great. There's also been some pragmatism and positivity too. Thank you so much all for joining us. I feel like we could talk about this for hours and hours. It's been great. Tomorrow's panel is about the food and drink industry, so do tune in and listen to that. But that's it from the fashion panel today. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.